I'd like to call to order the new Palestine Redevelopment Commission meeting at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, December 7th, 2022. As I mentioned, at 6 o'clock. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And may we have a roll call, please?
Bill Niemeyer.
Present.
Dr. Lisa Lathrop. Present. Steve Rainey.
Present.
Rachel Strong.
Present.
Mark Looney.
Present.
And Russell Smith.
Here.
All right, thank you. First order of business will be to approve the minutes from our November 30th, 2022 meeting. Ask the commission members if they've had a chance to review the minutes, and is there any changes or additions or something to that document? No? All right. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes from November 30th, 2022 of the new Palestine Redevelopment Commission?
I'll make that motion.
And do I have a second?
I'll go ahead and second.
All right, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Opposed state nay. Thank you, the motion carries. New business, we have the discussion of resolution 120722A, which is the declaratory resolution for the expansion of the allocation area. I think, Jim, you were going to present, or...
I think Doug was going to take you through that.
All right, fair enough. No, that's good.
I can start off, we can tag team it. So the resolution you have before you today is to expand the new Palestine Economic Development Area allocation. So you recall that there was an initial establishment of the new Palestine Economic Development Area. I believe that was in around 2016. It was expanded in 2019 to the expanded area. And we're on recital 4 here. The Commission now desires to amend the declaratory resolution designating the area as depicted in Exhibit B to include the expansion area, and that the plan amendment supports the expansion of the allocation area. This is all being done in conformance with Indiana statute. That the Commission deems it is advisable to apply provisions of the sections of 41, 43 of the Act to the economic development area as amended, and that the Commission now desires to approve the 2022 plan amendment to establish the 2022 expansion area as part of the allocation area. I don't know if you have the resolution before you. I don't want to read through the whole thing. Essentially what it's doing is adding on a parcel of land northeast of the current allocation area to be included in what would collect the tax increment. This does not approve any bonding or anything of that nature. It just collects the increment tax, so it would establish the base tax year, and then new development going forward would go to the Redevelopment Commission to support the development of those areas. We've talked about it a little bit before, but just to reiterate, the money that goes into the RDC can support, it has to support the allocation area. It doesn't have to be used directly in the allocation area as long as it's used somewhere in the town that is in support of that allocation area. Again, this does not establish any bonding or any debt, and does not issue money to anybody other than it collects it, adds to the allocation area, and that money goes to the RDC.
Okay.
Dr. Lantrop had a question that she expressed over email. I sent her some additional information. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that base level. So right now, in that area. There's a Needler's, Taco Bell, and a bank, and then the rest of the parcels are not fully developed. You'll see, well, it's Exhibit C to Exhibit C of the resolution, which is rather confusing. But there's proposed estimated funds to be generated by the tax increment. And it has parcel numbers. And I just looked up one on GIS. The third one down is Needler's. So you can see Needler's tax base for pay 2023 is $2,123,000. It's estimated that would stay the same for the next year. And so no increment from Needler's would go to the RDC. So it's the change in value from the base year going forward that gets captured. So I want to make sure we address that in public meetings. Does that answer your question?
It does, because prior to that, when we had the gas station conversation, when it was ordinance, but now it's getting to go, we excluded that piece of property from the allocation area, and that's what I was asking. Is Needler's included in the allocation area or excluded? And what you said is it's included, which I understood that from your answer.
Okay.
But I just wanted to make sure that's what I was asking.
And so this includes the land from, say, from 52 where Needler's is at, to the property all the way back up to the railroad track and just west of there, the 600. Is that correct?
And from 600 or Mount Comfort Road going east to the creek.
To the creek, okay.
So from the road to the creek, from 52 to the railroad tracks.
Okay.
And again, I think that we understand, but want to make sure that the tax that's right now on the Needler's building, that's the base.
Right.
So it's only any increase.
That the school corporation and other taxing entities would not get.
No, they do get what is there.
But not the increase as the assessed value goes up. The school
Correct.
corporation
If-
and other taxing entities do not get the increase.
That's
in
correct.
assessment.
So question, why now? Why are we doing this now? Why wasn't this brought up earlier or included in the original discussions when we were looking at location here?
That I defer to.
All right, take a shot at that. I'm not the full-time person here. Here's not, wasn't available this morning. I know, I mean, when you set up, there's two different things we're dealing with here. You have the,
Can you just introduce yourself? I don't think everybody.
oh, I'm sorry. Jim Treat with Cronin Associates, partner with Cronin Associates. Financial advisors to the town and the RDC. Thanks, I appreciate that. So I think when you set up your economic development area and encompass the business areas basically of the town, that was the first step. Then to actually set up allocation areas, which is where you actually collect the increment. You know, you took the stick, instead of making everything a big, huge allocation area, your approach, I believe, from the front end was to, let's grab those areas as we know they are starting to develop at the front end of the process. And so you would be making expansion, presumably over the long term, in this manner that you've been doing and that we're asking you to do tonight. So that's why it wasn't, I don't know exactly, Steve, about the timing. I think it was something that came to Jared's attention, and it's like, well, we need to, if we're going to capture, if this is going to continue to grow, this would be the appropriate area to capture some of those things, and so we can have those funds to do infrastructure projects as needed. So does that answer your question on that?
Yes.
So, but yeah, the base year, let me just clarify, because these years, I think they're confusing for taxpayers, for everybody trying to understand it. So if you adopt the declaratory resolution still in 2022, that the base values are January 1, 22, which is pay 23. So even next year, that's all base. That AV, in particularly the Needlers, which we show on Exhibit C, Fifth Third Bank as well, had been assessed as of January 1, 22. Although that's part of the development, It's already there, and it's already in 1122. So that is in base, and it will stay in base. So there won't be any growth. So the first year of any growth would be 1/1 of 23, which is what we're showing here. And for those things that we know what's going to be, what's in process, we tried to do some estimates based on comparable developments, other places. Some of these places we've just done land estimates, we don't know yet, but you do capture increases in the land value once it's established, so we did put some estimates into
Okay.
that. So.
I just have a question, why TIF here? Because the purpose of TIF, the way that I have always understood it, is that it is a tool to incentivize development. And this area does not need a tool to incentivize development. It is developing. I drove out there today and looked at
Right.
it.
No, that is not a true statement.
Okay,
That
well,
is
explain it to
one.
me.
That is one of the uses of TIF,
Okay,
and it's become a very common one. But really, I would describe it more as it enables development, because it gives funding for infrastructure that cannot be lot funded in any other way, or at least shares in that cost. And that development of that infrastructure will then allow that development to either occur, period, or to continue to occur. So it's, when you say incentives, that implies direct payments. That's not the case, always. That can be the case, and you've seen that in practice, and we do see it a lot, but it's by far not at least historically, it is not the most common. It is common these days, right now, but it's not the most common, and that is not what's being done here. It's not being done as an incentive. It's being done for the purpose of why you establish this area, so as growth occurs and you know when it's coming, you can establish that as part of this area and use those taxes to do some of the things that you need to do as far as general infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, utility work, whatever you deem is the most priority. So it does not have to be for incentives. I'll leave it at that.
I probably used the word incentive when I should have used the word spur, in that we're
Okay.
looking to increase the development in the area, not necessarily providing incentives directly to those businesses. When we put the TIF area for the health center and for the one that's on the southeast corner of that intersection, we did so in telling the school district and telling the fire department and telling the county that that the investment in that property, and by taking their taxes there, would spur other development that would increase their tax value, and that they would hopefully see a net positive out of that. Is the goal of this and every other thing to put a TIF on every development that we're putting up in town, so that we're getting income from all of those developments? I just don't understand why we have to put a TIF here when the area is already developing on its own. And if I'll be honest, it feels like a money grab.
Well, it's for public infrastructure, and you're just at the front end of really establishing your allocation areas and trying to get a cash flow. So it's something you can't answer in the long term what the best places are going to be to capture. This is really your decision, not mine. We can make recommendations and observations about where some obvious places would be, and it's not going to necessarily one for one. You're going to build up funds. You may use them. You won't necessarily use them on that corner. It will be maybe part of it. It'll be attached to it. It'll spur additional development. But yeah, it's not necessarily a direct one for one. But you're going to have to make, you or whoever's on the RDC are going to have to make decisions about what the most appropriate areas are to generate increments, so that you can use those for allowable purposes for the RDC. So
Do we know what those areas are zoned, the parcels?
I do not. I assume commercial.
I believe they're all commercial.
Let me see if there's anything man, that I have on my-
They're all B1.
And Rachel, if it helps, it's my understanding that you don't, under any circumstances, and maybe Jim, you can help explain, because I think at a meeting, Jared was explaining that you would never do any type of TIF work for residential purposes. Because if you do, there's all kinds of statutory penalties, and it pretty much completely destroys the reason for doing TIF. And Jim, is that correct?
Yes. There are now residential TIFs on a very restricted basis, but they're not very common. And that would not be part of your plan. You would never, you would be looking at commercial property zone.
I'm a student, always a student. If I might, so I'm gonna kind of explain my understanding of TIF and why the town, I'm gonna be talking out of both sides of my mouth, because I 100% represent the school corporation that's gonna ask you to consider it very carefully, because anytime we TIF, we lose money. And we can call it any way we wanna call it, but we lose money, as do other taxing entities, but I represent the school corporation. But on the flip side, when we put property taxes and caps into play, the towns and cities and towns lost money as well, that they need to use to build infrastructure such as sewers, sidewalks, and all of that. And TIF is one way that they can get money. Our only other way of getting money, the school corporation, is through a referendum. We have to ask the voters. The fire department, they have an avenue to get it. The police department has an avenue to get it. Different avenues that they don't have to go to the voters. But for us, the only way we can get the additional money that we need is through a referendum. And when we TIF, because everybody's costs are, skyrocketing right now. So even though, yes, we get the TIF money, or the money for the taxes at the current rate, in 5 years, when they go up again several times, we don't capture that. We lose that piece, but that's the money that we would need to help run our, really, transportation and the operating fund. So if we were to run a referendum, it would be to supply the operating fund so that we don't have to close programs down. But any TIF that we consider, I'm asking that you do it thoughtfully with us in mind. Because we're the biggest one that loses when we do the TIF, this biggest entity that takes tax dollars, besides the town.
Well, and I know.
Does that help with kind of
Sure.
the why we need, I understand why we need it. I'm not saying we don't need to capture revenue for the town, but please consider us.
And I know at our last meeting, we talked about having focus groups to, specifically meet with the library, with the township, the parks, the schools, other tax entities, so that we can work together, and if funds do come to the RDC, how they can be expended that benefit everybody, whether it's a direct benefit to one particular entity or to all. And I've said many, many, many times, one thing that I would really hope would be prioritized would just be a sidewalk system, so that people can go from one end of town all the way to the other and not have to walk into 52. And in my opinion, that benefits everybody. It benefits the schools. We don't have kids walking in 52, getting hit by cars. It benefits everybody. So, I know, Rachel, you said it was a money grab. What I see it as is the possibility to get the funds to do infrastructure that otherwise we wouldn't have the funds to do. So, and it's not to the detriment of everybody else, but to help everybody.
It's a balance, 100%. I've had conversations this week with a couple different people, and it's absolutely finding that balance, because when our schools are better, our community is better. People move here for our schools. It's a flat out misconception for anybody to say anything different. When our schools are better, our community is better. We have to find a place where we can find an equilibrium there. I completely understand that, and money grab was probably a little bit harsh, but it at the same time, my experience with TIF, and I've worked in economic development adjacent before, is that it's been used to lure commercial employers that are generally high-paying jobs that are, it's been used as an incentive to get companies to come here. I haven't seen it used in this way. Granted, it was 15 years ago when I worked in economic development, so things have changed, and I fully admit that. But I want to understand why, because to me, this kind of project would never have been approved for TIF 15 years ago, because it isn't creating high-quality new jobs.
If I may,
Yeah.
I think,
May I say something?
well, once the chair opens it up for public comment, I'm
No,
sure.
this has to do with, I've lived through TIF. I've done the first TIF. And in a small town, Crawfordsville. And I ended up putting 4 traffic lights in. We had a 20-year TIF. We paid it off in 7.
You see, everybody, you and this gentleman talking about paying off a TIF. You guys are thinking about the next step, which is bonding on a TIF. That's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about giving money to developers to incentivize them to come in, excuse me, sir. And we're not talking about bonding that you have to pay off a debt. This is simply expanding the economic development area so that you capture the TIF. Dr. Lantrip said the schools lose out. I think you said you lose money, which is maybe right, maybe parsing words, but what the schools do is they lose out on the increase. There's not money being taken away from schools, as in a power grab like you described. It's that they lose out on the increase. And this increased allocation area, as we've discussed, is a B1, so there's not an increase of students going into commercial areas. So yes, the schools don't participate in that increase during the period, but they're not getting money taken away from them. They're also not getting, in a B1, additional obligations that they need to fund going forward. And again, I want to make sure that you guys understand, because we're talking about paying off things. There's no debt being issued here. This is simply capturing the increment from an increased allocation area. When money goes to the RDC, this board would then decide and recommend to the council if they wanted to incentivize future development and what that development would be. So it's collecting a pool of money so that this board has the ability to incentivize and to direct what type of development the town wants. It's not issuing debt right now. It's not trying to incentivize, but the money would be used to incentivize and support development in the town.
Just for your reference, the school corporation lost $500,000 due to cap loss. As we tip, you push us closer to, we increase that cap loss. In other words, RDC got $220,000 check because of the December distribution of money, or that's what we will get. The school corporation loses a very large percentage. I've got the tax thing right here.
To date, we've received $25,000.
Total net distribution is $230,000, $797.
Because the balance went to the interest.
Correct. Huh?
Dr. Lantrip is
Yeah,
correct.
the balance went to the interest on that.
Of that, we would've-
The tax money recaptured.
Oh, okay, because of,
She's absolutely
That-
correct.
that-
Yes,
right.
twice a year, $25,000
Sorry.
stays
No
with
worries.
the RDC, the rest
Goes
goes
to
to
the-
payoff.
to
This makes the bond
Yeah.
for development.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I had forgotten about the fact that that was a bond
Yeah.
project and there were payments towards the bond, so
Right, this is how much.
I just know that we
Right.
received $25,000, and when you said 220, I was like, wait a minute, where did we get $221,000?
But remember, but of that money, the school corporation would have received part of that had it not been captured.
Do you know how much would that have been? Do you know?
About $100,000.
How much?
About $100,000.
I doubt if that's correct.
That's what our
Well-
business manager
Well,
has been
but
working with the
what
town,
happens-
or the people in the county with.
But what happens is just with the incremental assessed value that you're capturing, you don't lose, just because the RDC gets 50,000 or 200,000, that's not being proportionately taken away from the school or any of the other units. It is not. What happens is, in order for the school to generate the budget they need for the operating and the transportation fund that you referenced, the tax base does not include the growth in the TIF area. So they can still get the budget. It will be a higher tax rate. So the only real loss, yes ma'am, the only real loss is depending on what the circuit breaker impact is going to be. That's going to be a drastic percentage, smaller per piece of the pie, it's not dollar for dollar like you're trying to assert. That's not the case.
No, because we have cap loss of $500,000.
Right, but that's not all due to RDC.
Right,
That's
I'm just
because
saying,
of
when
the-
you talk about cap loss, we already have cap loss.
I understand that. But it's not you can't associate the tax dollars that come to RDC directly with what your
Sure.
property tax cap adjustment may be.
I'll let Bob be over tall you and you can explain to me.
That's fine. Anyway.
Any other questions from the commission?
I have one. What's the status, and I don't know if anybody here can answer, what's the status of these current sites? I know, are they shovel-ready, are they? mostly
There's
sho-
development in the Tony D's restaurant. When you say shovel-ready, probably not. Utilities are in the area, just like when Taco Bell went in, they had to run underground utilities from wherever they were to that parcel. So within the entire shopping center, because it's called the New Palestine Commercial Center, is that boundary area that we described before. Utilities are there, but not to those specific lots. So as the need, any future development, there would be the need to run utilities, redirect them to wherever improvements are going. But what I understand, there's no request for funding from the RDC or anyone else for those expenses. And, I guess before we vote, I think it would be a fair question to ask the property owner what his position on this would be. I mean, you're impacted,
I will discuss this.
if that's proper.
While you're incorrect, sir, I was talking about the infrastructure that the TIF in this particular situation paid for in Crawfordsville, okay? It paid for traffic lights, it paid for improvements, and it brought a new Walmart and everything else in that particular town, okay? That has, all I was saying is that particular TIF paid itself off in a period of 7 years instead of 20. And that was because of traffic improvement. And what I've discussed with Bill and understanding this is this particular situation that is being asked of you to increase the TIF district was done 3 times in Crawfordsville to capture a new area that had no development in it to help pay off funds. In that instance, this would be merely a improvement of life, like walking past, instead of somebody getting killed, walking on a road. And this is the clients that we work with. It's just more things that we can talk about that a client like Taco Bell came to town, and this is, and I believe this is true. I can ask Jim or Robinson or whomever, that this particular increase of this area is going to capture the Taco Bell improvement. So that is, if that captures that Taco Bell improvement and whatever else comes on, whatever else it does, it just helps get your sidewalks built. And heck, what if it saves one life from walking down 50? This is just merely an improvement of life services. That's my viewpoint. And you can ask any other questions of me, because I lived through a TIF, and it was the first TIF that this particular community ever did. And I was in the newspaper every day. So.
All right. Okay, thank you.
First of all, did I answer everything okay?
Yes. Yeah. So Do I have a motion to approve the RDC declaratory resolution 120722A?
I'll make that motion.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Those opposed state nay. All right, the motion carries. I will state, we did not have in the agenda, but for public comments, but this will come back to the RDC and the other commissions at a later date, and we'll make that open for public comments. I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but we will have a future meeting to discuss those. If this continues through the other commissions and so forth, then we'll come back to the RDC. And at that point in time, we'll have the public comment section added to the agenda to make sure that we hear from the public on that. I'm not trying to disrespect anyone, but just we know that we have another time and place for that. All right. Any other new business that we need to discuss? Oh, Dr. Lantrip, you want to mention your letter that you have provided the Redevelopment Commission.
Talked it through already, but I do respectfully request that you consider the following actions, because I've explained in the letter the adverse effects that could happen with our school district, right? So I'm asking you to consider, as a non-voting member, I'm asking you to consider when you expand the TIF allocation, please don't expand that anymore. That's our request, you know. Or if you have to do that, can you use abatements versus the 20-year TIF? That is much more user-friendly to taxing entities because it's a shorter time period. And then we've talked, and I believe you, that if when money is flowing, that you will help it flow toward the school district. I do believe that, but I may not always be here. So I would love some type of written guarantee that when money is flowing, that there would be support to the school district. And then the last thing is, when I sat the first meeting, I got to be a voting member, and I even made the motion to start this commission up, and then I was removed as a voting member. So I would like to request that me or a school district representative be a voting member versus a non-voting member. So those would be those things I would love for you to consider.
Can I respond to one, because one is very, very, very near and dear to my heart, and that is your last request. Because I think I went through the wall battling to get you to where you were not just a member, but a voting member, and I was told that the statute specifically prohibited that. I mean, that's, when Greg Morlock was our attorney, the advice I received was it's not possible because the statute doesn't allow it. But if there are other RDCs that have done that, then, you know, maybe we can talk to Doug and
It's 100% up to
Ted
the
and
commission.
see. I mean, because I will say for the record, if it's up to us, me personally, I am 1,000% favoring you not just being a member, but being a voting member, and always have been.
My understanding is the statute requires that I sit on the commission or a school representative sits on the commission, not necessarily voting, but as a voice, I guess. But it is up to the commission itself whether or not it's a voting member. And at some point, the legislation may change and say you have to be a voting member. But I believe, my understanding is up to the commission itself.
Do you know of any other
I do.
RDCs?
Lebanon School
Okay.
Corporation, the school superintendent represented the school district and was a voting member of the RDC.
Okay.
Yeah, can we look
Doug,
into
is
that?
that something we can look into? Because if we have the authority to do, and I don't know what anybody else thinks, but you would be the second strongest proponent of the schools on the RDC if you had a vote.
I think maybe the first.
You would be the first, I would be the second.
Okay, that's my job, is to support the school and represent them.
Yeah, we will, I think we should definitely look into that.
Look into that. Statutorily, the superintendent is the ex officio, but that,
Mhm.
I don't think that prohibits.
They can
them.
do a
We'll look into
designee.
it. It would be It would be the normal appointing authorities. The RDC is not a self-appointing board, so it'd be you as council president of the council, I imagine, would be the appointing authority.
Okay. They would appoint, but would they be able to provide voting capabilities, voting rights?
If they appoint him as a regular member.
Okay.
Again, I want to do the legal research. I didn't do the initial that said you couldn't, so.
Before
Right.
we adjourn, can I ask one last question?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to make sure that I understand the impact on the property owner and what your position is, because one of the things that is a statutory test, it's called the but-for test. And what that means is, if the allocation area wasn't approved this evening, what impact would that have on you and your plans, if any?
It affects client viability as far as getting new clients. And like I said, I think sidewalks is a very important situation for that area. Whether it be across the street to the hospital, to the library. I mean, people need to walk, and they can't do it. So, if I'm trying to find a client that wants to be proactive with a community, and I've built in smaller communities than Newtown. I've built in Nashville, Indiana, and things like this. So don't be picking on me when I say it's all about demographics, but you have to pitch what you've got, and the more things that we pitch, the better off we are. Does that make sense?
Are you at a detriment in developing your property if you don't have the amenities that can be provided?
I believe yes, but here again, board meetings can come up, I can have red hair or gray hair rather. And get voted in.
All right, thank you. And I just wanted to make sure I understood where you were.
But I think it would help that corner, and I think it would help the whole city, the town, excuse me.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn the New Palestine Redevelopment Commission meeting? Motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed state nay. All right, thank you, everyone.